Frankfurt, September 19th, 1812. In a modest house on a narrow street where gates lock at nightfall, Mayer Amschel Rothschild lies dying. He is 68 years old, the wealthiest Jew in Europe, and yet he has never left this ghetto. Around his bed stand his 5 sons, each already positioned in a different European capital: London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, Frankfurt. In his final hours, Mayer does something unusual for a dying man. He dictates not sentimental farewells but operational instructions. His will contains a clause that will govern his family for generations. The brothers must never divide the business, never pursue separate interests, never allow the family to fracture. They are to remain one entity, one intelligence, one organism operating across borders that divide kingdoms and empires. Outside this room, Europe is being remade. Napoleon's armies have swept across the continent, dissolving ancient empires, redrawing maps, creating and destroying nations with bewildering speed. The Holy Roman Empire, which had endured for nearly 1,000 years, ceased to exist 6 years ago. Money flows across borders in desperate rivers, governments borrowing to fund armies, aristocrats hiding fortunes from occupying forces, merchants scrambling to move capital ahead of advancing troops. In this chaos, the 5 Rothschild brothers have built something no one has built before: a private information network faster than any government's, a banking system that operates across enemy lines, a family business that functions as a single coordinated entity even when its parts are scattered across a continent at war. Mayer Amschel closes his eyes for the last time, but what he has created does not die with him. In the coming years, his sons will finance the defeat of Napoleon, fund the reconstruction of Europe, and demonstrate a principle that will reshape how power operates in the modern world. Whoever has information first controls what happens next. The question is not whether the Rothschilds were powerful. The archives prove they were. The question is how 5 brothers from a locked Jewish ghetto became the most important banking family in 19th century Europe, and what their rise reveals about the relationship between information, capital, and power. Before we follow that question into the ghetto where it all began, I want to ask you for something. If you're finding this story as compelling as I do, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows me to keep researching these deep historical investigations, and it genuinely means everything to me, and I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop a comment and let me know. I love seeing the global community that forms around these stories. Now let's go back to where this began, to a street that most of Europe wanted to pretend didn't exist. Frankfurt, 1744, the Judengasse. The name translates simply Jews' Alley. It is not an alley, it is a street approximately 12 feet wide and 1,500 feet long, hemmed in by walls and gates that lock every night. Roughly 3,000 people live here in conditions that municipal authorities in Frankfurt carefully monitor to ensure they remain degrading. Jews may not leave the Judengasse after dark or on Sundays or Christian holidays. They may not own land outside it. They may not practice most professions. They pay special taxes for the privilege of existing. The street reeks, there is no sanitation system, and fire is a constant threat in the cramped wooden structures. Families live on top of families, privacy is impossible, and every aspect of life unfolds under surveillance. Into this world, on February 23, 1744, Guttler Rothschild gives birth to a son. They name him Mayer Amschel, after a recently deceased relative. His father, Amschel Moses Rothschild, is a small-time money changer and trader in silk goods, occupations permitted to Jews because Christians consider them beneath dignity or theologically problematic. The family lives in a house marked by a red shield, Rothschild, hanging above the door, a marker in a street where buildings have names rather than numbers, because numbering would grant them the dignity of addresses. Mayer's early childhood unfolds in the rhythms of ghetto life. The days begin before dawn, when his father opens the shutters of their cramped front room and arranges his modest display of coins and silk samples. Young Mayer watches from the corner, learning to stay silent when customers appear, observing how his father's demeanor shifts depending on who walks through the door. With fellow Jews, Amschel Moses is relaxed, speaking in rapid Yiddish, joking about the weather, or complaining about the latest humiliation from the city authorities. With Christian customers, rare but crucial for business, his father becomes someone else entirely, more formal, more deferential, carefully modulating his voice to convey respect without civility, competence without presumption. The house itself tells the story of their constrained existence. The front room serves triple duty as shop, reception area, and dining space. Behind it, a narrow kitchen where Mayer's mother performs miracles with limited ingredients and even more limited space. Above, a single room where the entire family sleeps, parents, children, and often a visiting relative or two, bodies arranged on mattresses and pallets like pieces in a puzzle that must be reassembled each night. There is no place in this house that belongs to any one person. There is no corner where a child can retreat from the constant press of humanity. But within these constraints, his father conducts business in the cramped front room, exchanging currencies, arranging small loans, trading in whatever goods might turn a margin. His mother manages a household where space is measured in inches and privacy does not exist. Young Mayer shows aptitude for numbers early. He can calculate compound interest in his head by age 7, can recognize debased coinage by weight and appearance by age 9. In the evenings, by candlelight, his father teaches him the fundamentals, not just the mechanics of money changing, but the philosophy behind it. A coin is not a coin, Amschel Moses tells his son one evening, holding up a silver thaler to the candlelight. Do you see this edge? It should be perfectly rounded. But look here. Someone has shaved a sliver of silver. The coin still passes for full value because most people look at the face, not the edge. But we look at the edge. We always look at what others miss. And these lessons extend beyond coinage. Mayer learns to read the subtle signs of a customer's desperation, the way a man's eyes dart to the coins when he thinks no one is watching, the tremor in a woman's voice when she claims she needs a loan only temporarily, the too casual tone of someone trying to sell something they cannot afford to sell. He learns that the art of money changing is really the art of reading people, of understanding what they need and what they are trying to hide. The Judengasse operates under its own internal logic. Because Jews cannot own property or enter most guilds, they specialize in trades that require no fixed assets, money lending, peddling, trading in second-hand goods. Because they cannot rely on Christian courts for contract enforcement, they develop elaborate systems of trust based on family networks and community reputation. Because they live in constant proximity, information travels fast within the ghetto, even as its walls cut them off from the wider world. Every Friday evening, the rhythms of Sabbath transform the street. The men return from wherever the day's business has taken them, walking quickly to reach home before the gates lock. Women light candles in windows up and down the Judengasse, small flames that turn the cramped street into something briefly beautiful. For one day each week, buying and selling cease. Mayer's father closes his shop, covers his coins, and becomes someone focused on prayer and family rather than profit and survival. Young Mayer loves these evenings but also finds them disorienting. The man who spends 6 days calculating margins and evaluating risk spends the 7th day discussing Talmud and Torah, debating interpretations of texts that seem to have nothing to do with the price of silk or the reliability of various currencies. It takes Mayer years to understand that these are not separate activities, but different expressions of the same fundamental approach: close reading, attention to detail, respect for tradition, combined with willingness to reinterpret when circumstances demand it. The synagogue in the Judengasse is the only substantial building on the street, the only structure built from stone rather than wood. Here, 3 times a day, the community gathers for prayers. Here, young Mayer receives his religious education, learning Hebrew alongside his business arithmetic, studying ancient commentaries while developing a modern understanding of finance. The rabbis who teach him are themselves often involved in business. There is no separation in this community between the sacred and the commercial, between the study of God and the study of markets. These constraints, which are designed to humiliate and contain, inadvertently train the ghetto's inhabitants in exactly the skills that will prove valuable in the coming age: financial calculation, network-based business, and the ability to operate across political boundaries that matter little to people who have no political status. Then between 1755 and 1756, when Mayer is 11 or 12 years old, smallpox sweeps through the Judengasse. The disease respects no boundaries of piety or poverty. It moves from house to house like fire, and in the compressed space of the ghetto, there is nowhere to run from it. Mayer watches his mother weaken, fever consuming her despite the community's prayers and the remedies that neighbors bring. Within a week, she is gone. His father, perhaps weakened by grief or perhaps infected before his wife's death, follows within months. Mayer Amschel Rothschild is now an orphan with minimal inheritance and no clear path forward. At 12 years old, he has lost not just his parents, but his position in the world. The house under the red shield belongs to others now. The small business his father built must be liquidated to pay debts. Mayer finds himself dependent on the community that raised him, sleeping in the homes of relatives, eating meals provided by neighbors who have little enough themselves. This period, the year or two after his parents' death, leaves scars that Mayer will carry for life. He learns what it means to be dependent on others' charity, to have no place that is truly his, to go to sleep uncertain about where tomorrow's bread will come from. This experience imprints on him an obsession with security, with building something that cannot be taken away, with creating structures that will survive individual catastrophe. Everything he builds in later life can be traced back to this childhood trauma. The insistence on family unity, the refusal to take on outside partners, the compulsive reinvestment of profits rather than consumption. But the community that created his poverty also offers him rescue. A relative or family friend, the records are unclear on exactly who makes this happen, arranges for young Mayer to leave Frankfurt. He is sent to Hanover, to the banking house of Wolf Jakob Oppenheimer, to learn the trade properly. This is an extraordinary opportunity. Oppenheimer is a court Jew, one of the handful of Jewish financiers permitted to conduct business with Christian nobility. His bank handles significant transactions. For a Frankfurt ghetto orphan to receive training, that means someone has seen potential worth cultivating. The journey from Frankfurt to Hanover takes 3 days by coach. For Mayer, who has never been outside the Judengasse except for brief, supervised trips to Frankfurt's markets, it is a revelation. The countryside stretches endlessly, villages appear and disappear, and nowhere are there walls constraining where he can walk or gates locking at nightfall. He realizes for the first time how small his world has been, how much exists beyond the 12-foot wide street that was his entire universe. In Hanover, Mayer enters a different world. The Oppenheimer Bank operates from a substantial building near the city center. There are multiple rooms, each dedicated to specific functions, one for receiving clients, one for conducting private negotiations, one for the clerks who maintain ledgers and copy correspondence, one where Wolf Jakob himself works surrounded by maps of Europe and ledgers recording transactions across a dozen principalities. He is still Jewish, still subject to restrictions, but he is learning how money works at a scale his father never approached. Court finance operates on principles foreign to small-time money changing. Noble families borrow enormous sums and pay them back slowly, if at all. Governments fund wars through loans that might take decades to repay. The real art is not calculating interest but managing relationships, understanding who has access to tax revenue and who is about to fall from favor, reading the political winds that determine whether a debt will be honored or repudiated. Wolf Jakob takes a personal interest in Mayer's education. The old man, he is in his 60s when Mayer arrives, has no sons of his own, only daughters who cannot inherit the business under current law. Perhaps he sees in this intense Frankfurt orphan a possible successor. He teaches Mayer not just the mechanics of banking, but its philosophy. A loan to a prince is not the same as a loan to a merchant, Wolf Jakob explains one afternoon as they review accounts. The merchant must repay or his business fails. The prince can simply declare the debt void, or debase the currency, or die and let his heir repudiate everything. So why do we lend to princes? Because when they do honor their debts, the profits are enormous. And because having a prince in your debt creates obligations that transcend mere money. He may not repay the loan, but he will grant you privileges, access, protection. Sometimes the secondary benefits matter more than the primary transaction. Mayer absorbs everything. He learns multiple languages, his childhood, Yiddish, supplemented by German, French, and Latin. He studies the genealogies of noble houses, understanding that knowing who is cousin to whom, who stands to inherit what, who is rising in favor, and who is falling can be more valuable than knowing interest rates. He develops an eye for the art and antiquities that aristocrats collect, recognizing that shared aesthetic interests can open doors that business proposals cannot. He spends hours in Wolf Jakob's library reading not just financial ledgers but history, learning how previous fortunes were made and lost. He discovers that patterns repeat. Every generation thinks its wars and crises are unprecedented, but the cycles of debt and repayment, of monetary debasement and reform, of political upheaval and financial opportunity have been running for centuries. The names change, the technologies evolve, but human nature and political necessity remain constant. Most importantly, he learns that banking at this level is fundamentally about information. Knowing what others do not yet know, understanding the implications before they become obvious, positioning capital in anticipation rather than reaction. Wolf Jakob maintains correspondence in multiple cities, men who write weekly letters reporting on political developments, market conditions, military movements. These letters arrive in Hanover days or weeks before the information reaches general knowledge, and that gap between private knowledge and public awareness is where fortunes are made. Mayer sees this principle in action during the 7 Years' War. News arrives in Hanover that a battle has been fought and won by Prussia. Wolf Jakob immediately begins buying Prussian bonds, which are depressed because no one yet knows the outcome. 3 days later, official dispatches arrive confirming the victory, bond prices soar, and Wolf Jakob sells at substantial profit. The entire transaction takes less than a week and requires no particular brilliance, only having information before others have it. Information, Wolf Jakob tells Mayer, is perishable. It has value only during the gap between your knowing and everyone else knowing. Once everyone knows, the advantage disappears. So the question is always, how do we know first? And having known first, how do we act before others realize what we know? These lessons sink deep. Mayer understands that building a banking house means building an information network, that the quality of your correspondence matters more than the size of your capital. that speed of communication can be more valuable than depth of analysis. By 1764, when Mayer is 20 years old, he has absorbed everything Hanover can teach him. Wolf Jakob offers him a permanent position in the bank, a path to eventually taking over the business. It is an extraordinary opportunity, guaranteed prosperity, established relationships, escape from the Frankfurt ghetto forever. Mayer refuses. He could remain in Hanover, continue working for Oppenheimer, perhaps eventually take over the business. Instead, he goes back to the Judengasse. The reason appears to be family obligation. There is a business to maintain, connections to preserve. But perhaps there is something else. In Hanover, he will always be an employee, dependent on someone else's goodwill and subject to their decisions. In Frankfurt, humiliating and constrained as it is, he can build something of his own. The return to Frankfurt is jarring. After years in Hanover, where he could walk freely and live in a proper apartment, the walls of the Judengasse feel even more oppressive. The streets seem narrower, the smells more intense, the constant surveillance more intrusive. But Mayer has a plan. He has capital, not much, but enough to start. He has knowledge that no one else in the Judengasse possesses, and he has connections to Hanover, and through Hanover, to other centers of finance. He opens a small business in the family house under the Red Shield. The house itself has been reclaimed through family negotiations. Mayer's share of his father's estate, minimal as it was, has been converted into possession of a few rooms in the building where he was born. It is not much. A front room for business, a back room for living, access to the cramped upper floor that he shares with other tenants. But it is his. He trades in rare coins and medals, a specialty he developed in Hanover. This is shrewd positioning. Coin dealing is respectable. It involves antiquarian knowledge, attracts aristocratic collectors, and can justify visits to noble houses in ways that simple money lending cannot. Mayer catalogues his inventory meticulously, describing each coin's historical significance and rarity. Each entry in his catalogue is a small essay, demonstrating not just the object's value, but his own scholarship. He sends these catalogues to potential customers throughout the German states. The catalogues themselves are beautiful objects, carefully handwritten with illustrations in the margins. They signal that Mayer Amschel Rothschild is not a common peddler but a scholar merchant, someone whose knowledge adds value beyond the mere objects he sells. For 5 years, business is modest but steady. Mayer is building reputation, not fortune. He acquires a few aristocratic clients who appreciate his knowledge and discretion. He begins handling small financial transactions, currency exchange, short-term loans, bill discounting, alongside the coin business. He marries Guttler Schnapper in 1770 and their home in the Red Shield House becomes the center of a growing enterprise. Guttler proves to be not just a wife, but a partner. She manages the household with the same precision Mayer applies to business. As children arrive, Schönche in 1771, Amschel in 1773, Salomon in 1774, she creates order in their cramped quarters, ensuring that domestic life does not interfere with business operations. When customers arrive, children disappear to the back rooms. When Mayer needs to work late, Guttler manages the chaos of family life in whispers to avoid disturbing him. The partnership extends to business itself. Guttler has her own network within the Judengasse, her own sources of information about who is borrowing money and whether they are likely to repay, who is prospering and who is failing. This domestic intelligence network, operating through market conversations and synagogue gossip, provides Mayer with early warning about credit risks that ledgers would never reveal. Then, in 1769, everything changes. Through connections from his Hanover years, through his coin catalogues, through means that are not entirely clear in the surviving records, Mayer is introduced to Prince William of Hesse-Kassel. Prince William is one of the wealthiest men in Europe. His wealth derives from a source that shocks modern sensibilities. He rents out Hessian soldiers as mercenaries to other governments. The British employ thousands of Hessian troops, paying William enormous sums. He has been investing this blood money for decades, and by 1769 he has accumulated a fortune that requires sophisticated management. He is, in modern terms, looking for a private banker. Mayer presents himself not as a supplicant but as a specialist. He offers William rare coins from his collection, understanding that the prince is a collector. The first meeting occurs not in Frankfurt but in Hanau, where William maintains one of his residences. Mayer arrives carrying a carefully prepared case of ancient Roman coins, each one selected to appeal to what he has learned about William's tastes. The prince receives him in a private study lined with curiosity cabinets. William is in his late 40s, dressed in a silk dressing gown despite the afternoon hour, his manner combining aristocratic condescension with genuine interest in the coins Mayer has brought. They speak in German, Mayer's accent betraying his ghetto origins, but his knowledge of numismatics and ancient history marking him as educated. This sestertius, Mayer explains, holding up a bronze coin with careful reverence, was minted during the reign of Hadrian. Notice the reverse image. It depicts the rebuilding of the Pantheon. Hadrian was obsessed with construction, with leaving permanent monuments. He understood that power expressed through architecture endures longer than power expressed through conquest. William examines the coin, intrigued not just by the object, but by Mayer's interpretation. This is not the patter of a salesman, but the analysis of a scholar. They discuss Roman monetary policy, the debasement of currency under various emperors, the relationship between coin quality and imperial strength. An hour passes, then two. When Mayer finally departs, he has sold several coins at good prices and, more importantly, has established himself as someone the prince enjoys talking to. He provides services that larger banks cannot or will not. He is discreet, he is available at unusual hours, he handles transactions too small or politically sensitive for established houses. Most importantly, he demonstrates that he can be trusted with information. When William wants to move money quietly, Mayer moves it quietly. When William wants to make investments anonymously, Mayer arranges it. When William needs someone who will not gossip about the prince's financial affairs in Frankfurt coffee houses, Mayer proves constitutionally incapable of gossip. Over the following months and years, the relationship deepens. Mayer begins handling not just coin sales, but financial transactions. William has money flowing in from British payments for Hessian troops, and that money must be invested. Traditional German banks are obvious choices, but they are also indiscreet and politically connected in ways that create problems for a prince whose wealth comes from sources many Germans find distasteful. Mayer offers an alternative, a Jewish banker with no political connections, no social ambitions that might lead him to gossip, no reason to care about the moral implications of how William earned his wealth. Mayer does not judge, he simply executes. William wants to buy bonds in a particular German state. Mayer buys them. William wants to make loans to various aristocrats. Mayer arranges them. William wants these transactions kept private. Mayer keeps them private. In 1769, Prince William appoints Mayer Amschel Rothschild as his crown agent. This is not a position that comes with a salary or an office. It is a designation, a signal to others that this ghetto Jew has the prince's confidence. For Mayer, it is transformative. Suddenly, other aristocrats are willing to do business with him. Suddenly, he has access to capital beyond anything his father could have imagined. Suddenly, the Red Shield house in the Judengasse becomes a place where significant transactions occur. The following year, 1770, Mayer marries Güttler Schnapper. She is 17, the daughter of a respected money changer. The marriage appears to be both practical and affectionate. Over the coming decades, Güttler will bear 19 children, 10 will survive to adulthood, 5 sons and 5 daughters. This is a large family even by 18th century standards, and Mayer will deploy them with the same strategic precision he brings to business. Through the 1770s and 1780s, Mayer's business expands steadily. He is lending money, trading currencies, handling bond transactions, acquiring more aristocratic clients. But he is doing something else, something that will matter more in the long run. He is training his sons. The education of the Rothschild sons is meticulous and relentless. As each boy reaches age 7 or 8, he is brought into the front room to observe his father work. They sit silently in corners, watching how Mayer receives customers, how he evaluates loans, how he negotiates prices. They are not allowed to speak during business hours, but in the evenings, Mayer quizzes them about what they observed. "What did you notice about Herr Goldschmidt's hands when he asked for the loan?" Mayer asks young Amschel one evening. The boy thinks they were shaking. "Correct, and what does that tell us?" "That he is nervous?" "Yes, but why is he nervous?" "A man asking for a loan is always somewhat nervous, but Herr Goldschmidt has borrowed from us before without such trembling, so something has changed. What might that be?" Amschel considers. "His circumstances are worse than he admits." "Precisely. So we must be more careful with this loan than previous ones. We must secure better collateral or charge higher interest to account for increased risk. The numbers in the ledger tell part of the story. The trembling in a man's hands tells the rest." As each boy comes of age, Mayer brings him into the business, teaching him not just the mechanics of banking, but the principles that govern it. Information is more valuable than money. Relationships are more stable than institutions. Family can be trusted in ways that partners cannot. Move slowly, think in generations, never pursue short-term advantage at the cost of long-term reputation. The 5 sons, Amschel, Salomon, Nathan, Kalman, who will become Karl, and Jakob, who will become James, absorb their father's lessons, but they are not identical copies of him. Each develops his own temperament, his own strengths. Amschel, the eldest, born in 1773, is cautious and methodical. He has his father's patience, but lacks the aggressive ambition that drives the business to expand. He is suited to maintaining the Frankfurt base, preserving relationships, ensuring continuity. He will never be the brother who chases new opportunities in foreign capitals, but he will be the one who ensures that the Home Office remains stable while others range across Europe. Salomon, born in 1774, is smooth and diplomatic. He has a gift for reading people, for saying the right thing to put aristocrats at ease. Where Amschel is stiff and formal, Salomon is charming without being obsequious. He is the brother you send to negotiate with princes, to smooth over conflicts, to build relationships where none existed before. He is skilled at managing aristocratic egos, understanding that half of court banking is making nobles feel that lending them money is a privilege rather than a risk. Nathan, born in 1777, is different from his older brothers. He is aggressive, quick-thinking, willing to take risks his brothers would decline. Where Amschel deliberates and Salomon negotiates, Nathan decides and acts. He is his father's son in ambition, but surpasses even Mayer in sheer drive. He works longer hours, processes information faster, sees opportunities that others miss. He is also abrasive, impatient with fools, dismissive of social niceties. He will make more money than any of his brothers, but he will also make more enemies. Karl, born in 1788, is steady and reliable. He is less brilliant than Nathan, less charming than Salomon, less methodical than Amschel, but he is perhaps the most balanced of the 5. He does not chase spectacular successes, but he also avoids spectacular failures. He is the brother you trust to manage a branch competently, to handle routine business without supervision, to maintain standards without constant oversight. When Karl is eventually sent to Naples in 1821, he will apply this balanced temperament to one of the most politically volatile regions in Europe, navigating the complex world of Italian principalities and papal politics with remarkable stability. Naples presents unique challenges. The kingdom of the 2 Sicilies is perpetually unstable. Subject to revolutions, counter-revolutions, and interventions by Austria and France, the court is corrupt, the bureaucracy inefficient, the economy underdeveloped compared to Northern Europe. Other bankers have tried and failed to establish themselves there. But Karl succeeds precisely because he does not try to transform Naples into Vienna or London. He accepts the city on its own terms, working within its systems, however inefficient, building relationships slowly, never pushing for changes that would threaten established interests. He learns Italian fluently, marries into local Jewish society, and becomes a fixture of Neapolitan life. His home becomes a gathering place for diplomats, merchants, and aristocrats. Unlike Nathan, who dominates through force of personality, Karl influences through patient availability. He is always there, always willing to help with a transaction or offer advice on an investment. Over years, this steady presence creates obligations and loyalties that spectacular brilliance could not match. James, the youngest, born in 1792, will prove the most adaptable. Born after the French Revolution, coming of age in the Napoleonic era, he will operate in an environment radically different from the one his father knew. Where Mayer built his fortune through patient cultivation of aristocratic relationships, James will operate in post-revolutionary France, where aristocracy has been guillotined and new forms of power are emerging. He will prove capable of navigating both the old world of courts and the new world of republican institutions. The Paris that James enters in 1811 is a city transformed beyond recognition from the one that existed before 1789. The old aristocratic quarters have been reconfigured, churches have been turned into secular buildings. The social codes that governed who could do business with whom have been violently disrupted. In this chaos, James sees opportunity. The new Napoleonic nobility, generals who became counts, merchants who became barons, need banking services but are viewed with suspicion by old banking houses that served the murdered aristocracy. James positions himself as the banker for this new elite. He is young enough to have no associations with the old regime. He is foreign enough to be neutral in French factional politics. He is Jewish, which makes him an outsider, but Napoleon's civil code has granted Jews legal equality, so he can operate without the restrictions his father faced in Frankfurt. He learns French rapidly, acquiring not just fluency, but the particular Parisian accent and vocabulary that marks someone as sophisticated rather than provincial. His breakthrough comes through his relationship with the Napoleonic finance minister, and later, after Napoleon's fall, with the restored Bourbon government. James has a talent his brothers lack. He can work with people who hate each other. He maintains relationships with Bonapartists even as he cultivates royalists. When the Bourbons return in 1814, he is positioned to serve them. When Napoleon escapes from Elba and returns for the 100 Days, James maintains enough Bonapartist contacts to protect family interests. When the Bourbons return again after Waterloo, James is there, ready to help rebuild French finances. This political agility requires extraordinary judgment. One wrong move, being too obviously associated with the losing side, could destroy everything. James navigates by maintaining the family's fundamental principle. They serve governments, not ideologies. He will lend to any regime that can repay, regardless of its political character. This neutrality, which some call cynicism, is really sophistication. James understands that in France, where regimes change violently and frequently, survival requires not taking sides until the outcome is certain. But in the 1780s, the family business is still small scale, still confined to Frankfurt and its immediate region, still dependent on Prince William's patronage. What transforms this modest operation into a European dynasty is the event that transforms everything in Europe, the French Revolution. 1789, Paris explodes, the Bastille falls, the Assembly abolishes feudal privileges. Within months, the political order that has governed Europe for centuries begins to disintegrate. For aristocrats, the revolution is a nightmare. Their world is ending. For the Rothschilds, it is opportunity. not because they support revolutionary ideology, but because revolution creates massive capital flows, and capital flows create banking opportunities. News of the revolution reaches Frankfurt in fragments and rumors. The gates of the Judengasse, which have locked every night for centuries, suddenly feel less secure. If the political order can collapse in France, it can collapse anywhere. Some Jews in Frankfurt whisper hopefully about revolutionary ideals of equality spreading eastward. Others, including Mayer, are more circumspect. Revolution means opportunity, yes, but it also means chaos, and chaos is dangerous for minorities who depend on legal protections. As revolutionary France goes to war with the rest of Europe, Prince William becomes even wealthier. He is still renting out Hessian soldiers, and now he is lending money to governments desperate to fund armies against France. Mayer handles more and more of William's affairs, and in the process, he is learning something crucial. War is coming to Germany, and when it arrives, being confined to a single location will be fatal. A banking house that exists only in Frankfurt can be destroyed when armies arrive. A banking house distributed across multiple cities can survive any single catastrophe. The lesson crystallizes during a conversation with Prince William in 1797. They are reviewing accounts in William's private office when the prince makes an offhand comment. "If the French come here, Rothschild, you will lose everything. Your house, your business, everything is in one place. A single cannonball could destroy your entire fortune." It is said without malice, merely as observation, but it strikes Mayer like a blow. William is correct. Everything Mayer has built over 20 years exists in a few cramped rooms in the Judengasse. His ledgers, his correspondence, his cash reserves, all in one location. If French armies reach Frankfurt, if the Judengasse burns, if the political situation deteriorates and Jews are expelled, he loses everything. That night, Mayer discusses the problem with Gutler. Their children are asleep in the back rooms. The couple sits at the kitchen table, speaking in low voices. "We must disperse," Mayer says. "Oh, the boys must go to different cities. If everything is here, we are vulnerable. If we are in 5 cities, we cannot all be destroyed at once." Gutler is quiet for a moment. Then, "You are talking about sending our sons away. Nathan is only 20, Carl is 9, James is 5. Not all at once, gradually, as each becomes ready. Nathan first, he is old enough and aggressive enough to establish himself somewhere new. Then Salomon, then the others, as they mature. Amschel will stay here with me to maintain the Frankfurt business, but the others must go." "Where?" "London, certainly. The English will never be conquered by France. Paris, if possible, even though it is dangerous. Whoever can operate in the heart of revolutionary France will have advantages. Vienna, because Austria will remain important whatever happens. Naples or another Italian city, because Italy is wealthy and politically fragmented. 5 sons, 5 cities, 1 family." In 1798, Mayer makes his first great strategic deployment. He sends Nathan, aged 21, to Manchester, England. The official reason is textile trading. Manchester is the centre of British textile production, and there are profits to be made importing English goods to the continent. The deeper reason is positioning. England is the one major European power that Napoleon cannot invade. Whatever happens on the continent, London will remain standing, and the British government will remain solvent. Nathan is being positioned not just to trade textiles, but to establish a beachhead in the British financial system. The departure is difficult for the family. Nathan is the first son to leave, and no one is certain when or if he will return. Gutler prepares his belongings with trembling hands, packing clothes and prayer books and letters of introduction from his father. Young Nathan characteristically shows no sentimentality. "I will be successful," he tells his parents the night before his departure. In 5 years, you will not recognize how much I have accomplished." He is not boasting, merely stating his intention with characteristic certainty. Mayer embraces his son, pressing a leather wallet into his hands. Inside is capital, not enormous, but enough to begin operations. There are also letters, coded instructions for how Nathan should communicate with Frankfurt, names of contacts in England who might be useful. "Remember," Mayer says, "you are not going to England to become English. You are going to represent the family. Every decision you make reflects on all of us. Every success builds our collective reputation. Every failure damages us all. You are Nathan Rothschild, but you are also a Rothschild, and that means you are never alone and never independent." Nathan arrives in Manchester with limited capital and no connections. What he has is work ethic and his father's training. He works constantly, sleeping 4-5 hours a night, building a textile business through sheer aggressive salesmanship. He learns English rapidly, though he will always speak it with a heavy German Jewish accent. He rents a small warehouse, hires local workers, and begins importing textiles from the continent and exporting British manufactures. He is not likable. Contemporaries describe him as abrasive, impatient, arrogant, but he is effective. He undercuts competitors on price, delivers faster than expected, and gradually builds a reputation for reliability, if not pleasantness. Within 2 years, he is operating at a scale that attracts attention. By 1804, he moves to London and establishes N.M. Rothschild & Sons in the city, the heart of British finance. London is different from Manchester. In Manchester, Nathan was dealing with merchants and manufacturers, men who valued results over social graces. In London, in the city, connections matter more than competence. The great banking houses, Barings, Hope & Co., Smith, Payne & Smith, have operated for generations. They know everyone. They belong to the right clubs. They speak with the right accents. Nathan Rothschild is an outsider, Jewish, foreign, lacking social polish. He compensates through sheer aggression and superior information. While established banks wait for business to come to them, Nathan hunts for opportunities. While they maintain genteel office hours, he works from dawn to midnight. While they rely on official dispatches for news from the continent, Nathan receives letters from his brothers several times a week, giving him information about European markets days before it reaches his competitors. His method of operating becomes legendary in the city. He stations himself at a particular pillar. In the Royal Exchange, it becomes known as the Rothschild Pillar and conducts business there for hours each day. Traders learn to watch Nathan. When he buys, they buy. When he sells, they sell. His movements become market indicators, and he learns to use this influence carefully, sometimes feinting in one direction to mislead competitors before moving decisively in another. Meanwhile, the situation on the continent deteriorates. Napoleon crowns himself emperor in 1804. In 1806, he defeats Prussia and dissolves the Holy Roman Empire. For Frankfurt, this brings both liberation and threat. The gates of the Judengasse are opened. Jews are granted civil rights for the first time, but Frankfurt is now occupied by French forces, and anyone with visible wealth is a target for confiscation. Mayer navigates this chaos carefully. When French authorities demand contributions from wealthy Frankfurt citizens, he pays enough to avoid suspicion, but not so much as to reveal the true scale of his operations. When French officials inquire about his business, he portrays himself as a small-time trader in coins and curiosities. The extensive banking operations, the correspondence with his sons across Europe, the management of Prince William's fortune, all of this remains hidden beneath a surface of apparent modesty. For Prince William, Napoleon's advance creates an existential crisis. William has sided with the enemies of France, and now French armies are approaching Hesse Castle. He must flee. But he cannot take his fortune with him. Moving millions in cash and bonds across war-torn Europe is impossible. He needs someone to hide his wealth, invest it, and return it when the war ends. He needs someone he trusts completely, someone who will not simply steal everything the moment he leaves. He chooses Mayer Amschel Rothschild. The transfer of William's fortune to Rothschild management is conducted in stages, in secret. Some assets are converted to portable form, bills of exchange, bonds that can be hidden or transported. Others are left in place but transferred legally to Mayer's name or to proxy names that obscure William's ownership. The whole operation unfolds over months in 1806 and 1807, conducted through coded correspondence and midnight meetings. What happens next is poorly documented, deliberately so. The French occupy Hesse Castle. They confiscate what they can find of William's fortune, but they do not find most of it because most of it is no longer in Hesse Castle. It is dispersed, hidden, invested through intermediaries and shell arrangements that the French cannot trace. Mayer and his sons, using the network they have been building for years, move William's fortune through Europe like water flowing around obstacles. Some goes to London through Nathan, some stays in Frankfurt, buried in accounts the French do not scrutinize. Some moves to Vienna, where Salomon is now positioned. Some goes to Paris, where James is establishing himself in the heart of enemy territory. The operation requires extraordinary coordination. Salomon has been sent to Vienna in 1800, where he begins cultivating relationships with Austrian aristocrats and government officials. The Austrian Empire, though damaged by Napoleon, remains one of the great powers, and Vienna remains a crucial financial center. Salomon operates from rented offices, building a business that mirrors his father's approach: discretion, reliability, gradual accumulation of trust. James, the youngest son, is sent to Paris in 1811. He is only 19 years old, but France is too important to ignore. Despite the revolution, despite Napoleon, Paris remains the center of continental culture and commerce. James arrives, speaking barely adequate French, with limited capital and no connections. What he has is youth, adaptability, and the backing of his father and brothers. In Paris, James faces challenges his brothers did not encounter. The revolution has guillotined many aristocrats who might have been clients. The new Napoleonic elite is suspicious of foreigners and especially of Jews. French banks are well established and politically connected. James must build a business in an environment openly hostile to everything he represents. He succeeds through combination of charm and competence. Unlike Nathan, who never bothers to be likable, James cultivates French manners. He learns to dress like a Parisian gentleman, to appreciate French cuisine and culture, to speak the language eventually without accent. He ingratiates himself with the new Napoleonic nobility, who have wealth but lack the banking relationships that old aristocracy maintained for generations. To these new men, James offers services that established French banks provide reluctantly: discretion about the sometimes questionable origins of their fortunes, willingness to handle transactions too small or too sensitive for major banks, absolute confidentiality. By 1812, all 5 sons are positioned: Amschel in Frankfurt, Salomon in Vienna, Nathan in London, Karl preparing for deployment to Naples, James in Paris. The architecture Mayer envisioned is nearly complete. The brothers communicate through coded letters, often written in Yiddish to reduce the chance that anyone intercepting them can read them. They use Hebrew calendar dates. They employ ciphers where even Yiddish seems too transparent. The content of their letters from this period, when they survive, reveals men operating under enormous stress, moving capital through active war zones, constantly aware that discovery means confiscation and possibly death. A letter from Nathan in London to Salomon in Vienna, dated August 1811, survives in the family archives. "Dear brother, the situation here develops favorably. Our friends are agreeable and business proceeds. I have received your communication regarding the special matter." This almost certainly refers to Prince William's fortune, and have acted accordingly. The items you mentioned are secure and producing as expected. I enclose a detailed accounting in our private notation. Regarding the other concern you raised, I believe we should proceed cautiously. The climate is uncertain and hasty action might produce difficulties. Let us wait and watch. I trust this finds you and your family well. Our mother writes that she is pleased with your recent letter. Give my regards to our friends in your location. Your brother, Nathan. The letter seems innocuous, but every phrase carries specific meaning. Our friends refers to government contacts. The special matter is William's fortune. The items are specific investments. The other concern is probably a business opportunity that Salomon has proposed and Nathan is counseling against. The private notation is a cipher only the brothers can decode. Our mother writes, confirms that letters are still passing between London and Frankfurt, maintaining family connection across the war. But they succeed. Not only do they preserve William's fortune, they grow it. While he is in exile, his capital is earning returns. When he eventually returns after Napoleon's defeat, he finds his wealth not just intact, but increased. For the Rothschilds, the reward is more than commission. It is proof of concept. They have demonstrated that they can operate across borders during war, that they can keep secrets under pressure, that they can be trusted with sums that most banks cannot imagine. By 1812, when Mayer dies in Frankfurt, his 5 sons are positioned across Europe in what will become the family's fundamental architecture. Amschel in Frankfurt, Salomon in Vienna, Nathan in London, Karl in Naples, James in Paris. 5 brothers, 5 capitals, 1 family, and Mayer's will ensures they will stay that way. The brothers must not divide the business. They must consult each other on major decisions. They must marry within the family, cousins, to keep capital from dispersing. The family must remain one organism. In September 1812, as Mayer's body is buried in the Frankfurt Jewish cemetery, his sons are already executing the plan he has given them. They are about to enter the phase that will make them the most powerful banking family in Europe. Everything until now has been preparation. Everything that comes next will be demonstration. The year is 1813 and Napoleon is beginning to lose. His invasion of Russia has failed catastrophically. The Grande Armée that marched into Russia with over 600 Zielsoldaten has returned with fewer than 100,000 hours. The myth of Napoleonic invincibility is broken. All across Europe, governments that had submitted to France are reconsidering their positions. Coalition after coalition forms to finish what Russia started. This creates a financial crisis of unprecedented scale. Armies require funding. Moving that funding across a continent where borders shift weekly, where currencies fluctuate wildly, where today's ally may be tomorrow's enemy, requires a banking system that can operate independently of any single government. The Rothschilds are the only banking family with that capability. Nathan, operating from London, becomes the key figure. The British government is funding not just its own armies, but subsidizing its continental allies, Austria, Prussia, Russia. Moving British gold to Allied armies in Central Europe during active warfare should be impossible. Roads are impassable, borders are closed, and governments are confiscating anything of value they can find. Traditional banking houses give up, declaring the task too risky. Nathan does not give up. The British government needs to send money to Wellington's armies in Spain and Portugal, and to Austrian forces fighting in Central Europe. The traditional method, shipping gold coins across hostile territory, is too slow, too risky, and too obvious. Nathan proposes an alternative using the family network. The mechanism is elegant. British gold is deposited with Nathan in London. He issues bills of exchange, essentially promissory notes, drawn on his brothers in various European cities. These bills are small, portable, and worthless to anyone who cannot cash them at a Rothschild bank. British couriers carry these bills to the continent. James in Paris converts some to French currency for operations in Spain. Salomon in Vienna converts others to Austrian currency for operations in Central Europe. Karl, now established in Naples, handles Italian operations. The system works because the five brothers trust each other absolutely and because they maintain capital reserves in all major currencies. When Nathan issues a bill in London, he trusts that Salomon in Vienna will honor it even if communication has been disrupted. When James promises to deliver French francs in Paris, Nathan trusts he will do so, even if that requires James to use his own capital temporarily. The family functions as a single financial intelligence, moving money through Europe faster and more reliably than any government can. For the British government, this service is invaluable. Nathan Rothschild becomes the primary channel through which British subsidies reach continental armies. In 1814 alone, he moves millions of pounds through this network. The British Treasury becomes dependent on Rothschild services, and dependency creates leverage. Nathan negotiates not just fees but favourable terms for other family business. He gains access to British government bond markets. He receives early information about British military and political developments. The relationship with the British government becomes a foundation of family power for generations. He uses his brothers. Gold moves from London to Paris, where James, operating under French noses, converts it to bills of exchange. Those bills move to Frankfurt, where Amschel converts them back to currency. Salomon in Vienna coordinates with Austrian officials. Karl in Naples manages Italian routes. The five brothers function as a single financial intelligence, moving money through Europe faster and more reliably than any government can. The British government, desperate to fund its allies, becomes dependent on this service. Nathan Rothschild becomes the primary channel through which British subsidies reach continental armies. He is not doing this out of ideology. The Rothschilds have no particular loyalty to Britain or Austria or any other power. They are doing it because it is profitable and because success creates dependency. The more essential they become to British financing, the more power they accumulate. By 1814, Napoleon is defeated and exiled to Elba. The Congress of Vienna convenes to reconstruct Europe. The Rothschilds, who financed the armies that defeated Napoleon, are now positioned to finance the peace. Salomon in Vienna cultivates Metternich, the Austrian chancellor, who will dominate European politics for the next 3 decades. The relationship between Salomon and Metternich becomes one of the crucial political financial partnerships of the 19th century. Metternich is rebuilding Austria's finances after years of war. He needs bankers who can raise capital, manage debt, and maintain discretion. Salomon provides all three. More importantly, he provides information. The Rothschild network, receiving letters from London, Paris, Frankfurt, and Naples, gives Salomon a perspective on European affairs that rivals Metternich's own diplomatic intelligence. They meet regularly in Vienna, sometimes in Metternich's offices, sometimes in the elegant apartments that Salomon now maintains. They discuss not just Austrian finances but European politics, which governments are stable, which are facing challenges, where money might be invested safely, where risks are developing. These conversations blur the line between banking and diplomacy. Salomon is not just Metternich's banker. He is an informal advisor, a source of information, a back channel to other European capitals. James in Paris establishes relationships with the restored Bourbon monarchy. When Louis XVIII returns to the French throne after Napoleon's abdication, he finds a country financially devastated by war. French government bonds are nearly worthless. No one trusts that the new regime will honor debts incurred by the empire. France desperately needs credit but cannot access traditional markets. James sees opportunity. If he can restore confidence in French government debt, the rewards will be enormous. He begins buying French bonds when they are trading at massive discounts, believing that a stable French government will eventually honor them. Other bankers think he is insane. Why invest in a country that has just emerged from revolution and empire, where political stability is uncertain at best? But James has information his competitors lack. His brothers report on how European governments are discussing France at the Congress of Vienna. He learns before anyone else in Paris that the European powers have decided to support the Bourbon Restoration, that they will help stabilize French finances because instability in France threatens everyone. Armed with this knowledge, James accumulates French debt before the public realizes that France will be supported rather than punished. When the news becomes public, French bond prices soar. James makes enormous profits, and equally importantly, he establishes himself as the banker who believed in France when others doubted. The Bourbon monarchy remembers this. For the next 15 years, until revolution returns in 1830, James will be one of the most influential financiers in France. Nathan in London becomes the dominant force in the British government bond market. Then, in March 1815, Napoleon escapes from Elba. Within weeks he has raised a new army. The coalition against him reforms, but everyone knows this will be the final confrontation. Whoever wins the next battle will determine the future of Europe. On June 18, 1815, that battle is fought at Waterloo, in present-day Belgium. The Duke of Wellington, commanding British and Allied forces, faces Napoleon in a fight that lasts all day and ends with Napoleon's definitive defeat. The battle ends around 9 p.m. The news that Napoleon has lost must now travel to London, 200 miles away, where the financial markets will react violently the moment they know the outcome. This is where the myth overwhelms the history. The story that everyone knows claims that Nathan Rothschild received news of Waterloo's outcome before the British government, through carrier pigeons or superfast couriers. He then went to the London Stock Exchange and began selling British government bonds, creating a panic. Other traders, seeing the Rothschild sell, assumed Britain had lost and sold frantically, driving bond prices to rock bottom. Then, when prices had crashed, Nathan bought everything back at a massive discount. Hours later, official news arrived that Britain had won, prices soared, and Nathan made millions in a single day. This story appears first in an 1846 pamphlet and is repeated endlessly thereafter, always with the same moralizing structure. The clever Jew manipulates Christian panic to steal wealth. It becomes a staple of anti-Semitic propaganda, appearing in Nazi publications and modern conspiracy theories. The problem is that it is not supported by evidence. What the Rothschild archives reveal, open to scholars only in 1999, is more complex and less dramatic. Nathan did have early information about Waterloo. His courier network was faster than government channels. A Rothschild agent named Rothworth was present at Waterloo and immediately departed for the coast. He crossed the channel despite rough seas that delayed official dispatches, reaching London before the government's messengers. This gave Nathan perhaps 12 to 24 hours advance knowledge of the outcome. He did profit from this information, but the mechanism was not a single day of market manipulation. It was months of positioning. Nathan had been buying British bonds steadily in the months before Waterloo, when prices were depressed due to war uncertainty. He understood that if Britain won, bond prices would soar. If Britain lost, the bonds would become worthless, but in that case, all his other investments would also be destroyed, so the bonds represented limited additional risk. When Britain won, those bonds increased in value. He made money, but through patient accumulation and superior information, not through theatrical fraud. The truth is interesting enough. Having information hours or days before competitors consistently over years creates enormous advantage. The Rothschilds' courier network, using ships across the Channel, horses across the continent, agents in every major city, was faster than any government system. They knew about political changes, military movements, economic developments before anyone else. This allowed them to position capital ahead of events rather than reacting to them. In the decade after Waterloo, this information advantage transforms into financial dominance. The Rothschilds become the primary issuers of government bonds across Europe. When Prussia needs to borrow £5 million in 1818, it is the Rothschilds who arrange the loan. When Austria needs capital, when France needs capital, when various German states need capital, they all turn to the same family. The mechanism of a Rothschild bond issue becomes standardized. A government approaches one of the 5 brothers, usually the one in that country's capital. Terms are negotiated. How much is being borrowed, at what interest rate, over what period? Then the real work begins. The 5 brothers coordinate to distribute the bonds across European markets. Suppose Austria wants to borrow £10 million. Salomon in Vienna negotiates terms with the Austrian government. Then he writes to his brothers. Nathan in London will sell Austrian bonds to British investors. James in Paris will sell to French investors. Amschel in Frankfurt will sell to German investors. Karl in Naples will sell to Italian investors. Within weeks, the entire loan is placed across multiple markets, spreading the risk and creating demand that no single market could absorb. This cross-border distribution is revolutionary. Before the Rothschilds, government bonds were typically sold in the borrowing country's own market. This limited how much could be borrowed. Even wealthy countries had finite numbers of investors. The Rothschilds create a pan-European market, allowing countries to borrow beyond their domestic capacity. This creates a new phenomenon in European politics. Traditionally, banks served single monarchs, court Jews like Oppenheimer, or Christian banking houses tied to particular states. The Rothschilds serve everyone simultaneously. They are lending to Austria and Prussia, ancient rivals. They are financing the restored French monarchy while maintaining ties to Britain, France's historical enemy. They are creating a financial system that operates independently of political allegiances. This independence makes them powerful but also vulnerable. Governments resent being dependent on private bankers. Aristocrats resent Jewish wealth. The old court banking families resent being supplanted by Frankfurt upstarts. Anti-Semitism, which had been constrained by ghetto walls, now finds new expression in resentment of Jewish financial power. Cartoons appear showing Rothschilds as spiders or octopi with tentacles spanning Europe. Pamphlets warn of Jewish control over Christian nations. The brothers understand they need more than wealth, they need legitimacy. In 1822, the Austrian emperor grants all 5 brothers baronies. They are now officially nobility, entitled to coats of arms and the prefix von before their names. This is unprecedented. Jewish bankers have occasionally been ennobled before, but never an entire family simultaneously. The grants recognize what has become undeniable. The Rothschilds are no longer service providers to aristocracy. They are, in financial terms, equals. The coat of arms is designed carefully to express the family's identity and values. It features a shield held by 4 hands emerging from clouds, representing the 4 younger brothers supporting the family enterprise, with an arm holding 5 arrows above, representing the 5 brothers' unity. The Latin motto reads Concordia, Integritas, Industria, Harmony, Integrity, Industry. Every element emphasizes family unity and shared purpose. But titles cannot erase origins, and origins shape everything about how the family operates. Every brother grew up in the Frankfurt ghetto. Every brother remembers the gates that locked at night. Every brother understands that Christian tolerance is contingent and revocable. This memory drives their obsessive secrecy, their refusal to take on partners outside the family, their insistence on marrying cousins to cousins. They trust no one who did not grow up under the red shield. The marriage strategy is particularly striking. Of the 58 marriages among Mayer Amschel's descendants over the next century, more than half are between cousins. Nathan's children marry Salomon's children. James's children marry Karl's children. The goal is to keep capital within the family, to ensure that no Rothschild fortune can be claimed by outsiders through marriage or inheritance. The biological cost of this strategy becomes apparent over generations. Hemophilia and other genetic disorders appear with increasing frequency, but the financial logic is clear. A banking house is only as secure as its secrets, and secrets are only secure within family. James's marriage to his own niece Betty, daughter of Salomon, exemplifies the pattern. Betty is 19 when she marries her uncle James, who is 42. The marriage produces 5 children and lasts until James's death. Betty becomes one of the great hostesses of Paris, running a salon where politics, finance, and culture intersect. She is simultaneously James's wife, business partner, and link back to the Vienna branch through her father. By the 1820s, the 5 brothers have established the pattern that will govern the family for decades. They meet rarely in person, but correspond constantly. Every morning, each brother writes to the others describing market conditions, political developments, client requests, opportunities, and threats. These letters, thousands of which survive in the family archives, reveal the real mechanism of Rothschild power, coordinated action based on shared information. A typical morning in Nathan's London office begins with reading letters from his brothers. The letters have arrived over the past few days by various routes, some through official post, others through private couriers, the most sensitive through trusted family agents who memorize messages rather than commit them to paper. Nathan reads them all before conducting any business, absorbing information about what is happening in Frankfurt, Vienna, Paris, Naples. He learns that Salomon in Vienna is negotiating a loan to the Austrian government and needs to know whether Nathan can place bonds in London. He learns that James in Paris is concerned about French political developments that might affect bond prices. He learns that Amschel in Frankfurt is worried about a particular client who may be over-leveraged. He learns that Karl in Naples reports on Italian market conditions. With this information, Nathan makes decisions that his competitors, seeing only London markets, cannot. If Salomon needs him to place Austrian bonds, Nathan evaluates not just British demand but how Austrian bonds will compete with other securities, whether political news from Vienna that his brothers report suggests good timing, whether taking on Austrian debt will constrain the family's capacity to pursue other opportunities. His decisions consider not just Nathan's London operations but the entire 5-branch network. When there is an opportunity in one market, all 5 houses position accordingly. When there is a threat in one capital, all 5 houses prepare defences. When a government approaches one brother with a loan request, that brother consults the others before accepting terms. The family acts as a single entity distributed across 5 locations, able to see the European financial system from multiple perspectives simultaneously. This gives them a perspective that no competitor can match. A banker in London sees British markets. A banker in Vienna sees Austrian markets. The Rothschilds see how movements in one market will affect all others because they operate in all markets simultaneously. They can see arbitrage opportunities that are invisible to anyone with a single vantage point. They can see political risks developing in one country that will affect bonds in another country. They can move capital from declining markets to rising ones faster than anyone else because they know about the decline and the rise before anyone else. In 1824, Nathan demonstrates the strategic discipline that defines Rothschild operations. Simon Bolivar, leading independence movements across Latin America, approaches the Rothschilds for financing. This is a potentially enormous opportunity. New nations need capital, and whoever finances them will dominate their economies for decades. Other European banks are rushing to issue Latin American bonds, seeing vast potential returns. But Nathan refuses. His reasoning is coldly practical. Latin American independence movements are militarily successful, but politically unstable. Lending to them means accepting bonds that might never be repaid from governments that might not survive. The potential returns are high, but so are the risks, and the Rothschilds do not chase high-risk returns. This decision is revealing. Other banks, seeing potential profits, flood into Latin American bonds. Many will lose fortunes when those governments default. The Rothschilds, by declining to participate, preserve capital and reputation. They are building for generations, not years, and that means saying no to opportunities that might destroy them. The same logic governs their approach to existing clients. When the French government approaches them for loans that seem unsustainable, James says no. When German states want to borrow beyond their capacity to repay, Amschel says no. The brothers have learned from their father that reputation is more valuable than any single transaction. A bank that never forces clients into default develops relationships that last decades. A bank known for saying no to bad loans attracts the best clients. By the 1830s, the Rothschilds have become synonymous with international finance. When governments need capital, they go to the Rothschilds first. When major business ventures need funding, they seek Rothschild backing. The family's wealth is now estimated in the hundreds of millions of pounds, making them collectively richer than most monarchies. But wealth creates new problems. The brothers are aging. Nathan, the most aggressive and brilliant, is in his 50s and working himself to exhaustion. Salomon is managing Austrian affairs while Metternich's conservative order faces increasing liberal opposition. James in Paris is navigating a restored monarchy that grows more unpopular by the year. The question becomes, can the next generation maintain what the founders built? In 1836, Nathan dies in Frankfurt, where he had travelled for a family meeting. He is only 58, but the years of constant stress have destroyed his health. His death creates a crisis. Nathan was the dominant figure in the family business, the brother who took the biggest risks and generated the largest returns. N.M. Rothschild and Sons in London is the most powerful of the five houses. Who will run it now? The answer reveals the family's succession planning. Nathan's eldest son, Lionel, takes over the London house. He is 28 years old, trained from childhood for exactly this role. He does not have his father's aggressive brilliance, but he has something more valuable for maintaining a dynasty: steady judgment. Under Lionel, the London house continues to dominate British bond markets without the dramatic gambles that sometimes characterized his father's approach. Lionel has been prepared for this moment since childhood. Nathan, despite his relentless work schedule, invested enormous time in training his sons. Lionel accompanied his father to the Royal Exchange, observed negotiations, read correspondence, learned the family's coded communication systems. By the time Nathan dies, Lionel knows every major client, understands every significant position the London house holds, and has relationships with the key British government officials his father cultivated. The transition demonstrates the family's fundamental strength. They are not dependent on any single genius. They are a system, and systems can survive the loss of individuals. When Salomon dies in 1855, his son Anselm takes over in Vienna. When James dies in 1868, his son Alphonse inherits the Paris house. The third generation steps into roles prepared for them, maintaining relationships their grandfathers established, operating businesses their fathers built. but the world is changing in ways that will challenge Rothschild dominance. The middle of the 19th century brings technological transformation that undermines their fundamental advantage. In the 1840s, telegraph lines begin connecting European capitals. Information that once took days to travel now moves in minutes. The Rothschild courier network, which gave them hours or days of advance knowledge, becomes obsolete almost overnight. The first telegraph line connects London and Paris in 1851. Nathan is already dead, but Lionel experiences what his father never had to face: competitors receiving the same information at the same time. News of a political development in Paris now reaches London investors minutes after it occurs. The Rothschild advantage, knowing first, disappears. The family adapts by shifting emphasis from information speed to information interpretation. If everyone receives news simultaneously, advantage comes from understanding its implications faster, from having the analytical framework to recognize what matters and what is noise, from maintaining relationships that provide context others lack. The Rothschilds still have 5 brothers observing European events from 5 perspectives, and that multi-viewpoint analysis remains valuable even when raw information moves instantly. Simultaneously, the nature of capital is changing. In the early 19th century, most large capital projects were government loans, financing wars, paying debts, managing state budgets. The Rothschilds dominated this market because they had the capital to underwrite sovereign debt and the international network to distribute bonds across borders. But by mid-century, the largest capital requirements are coming from industrialization: railways, mines, factories. These require different expertise, different risk calculation, and often different time horizons than government bonds. The Rothschilds adapt by moving into railway financing, becoming major backers of railway construction across Europe. They fund the Austrian Nordbahn, the French Chemin de Fer du Nord, and numerous other lines. Railway financing is profitable, but it is also different from what they specialized in. Government bonds are backed by taxation. States might default, but the underlying revenue source is clear. Railway bonds are backed by projected traffic and ticket sales, much harder to evaluate and much more likely to fail. James in Paris becomes particularly involved in French railway development. He finances the Chemin de Fer du Nord, which connects Paris to the northern industrial regions. This is one of the most profitable railways in Europe, vindicating his investment. But he also finances lines that fail to attract sufficient traffic, losing substantial sums. The difference between successful and unsuccessful railways often comes down to factors: route selection, competition from other lines, local economic development, that are harder to evaluate than the solvency of governments. Some Rothschild railway investments succeed brilliantly, others fail expensively. What becomes clear is that industrial financing requires different skills than court banking, and the Rothschilds' competitive advantage, information networks, government relationships, cross-border coordination, matters less when evaluating whether a particular railway route will attract passengers. Through the 1840s and 1850s, the family remains dominant in European finance, but rivals are emerging. The Barings in London compete for British government business. Patriarch brothers in France challenge Rothschild dominance in French markets. New banking houses, often structured as joint stock corporations rather than family partnerships, begin to rival Rothschild capital. The Patriarch brothers, Emil and Isaac, are particularly threatening. They are Jewish like the Rothschilds, but they represent a different model: aggressive, speculative, willing to take risks the Rothschilds decline. They found Crédit Mobilier in 1852, a bank that pools investment from hundreds of shareholders to fund industrial projects. This allows them to raise capital beyond what any family partnership can match. James views the Patriarchs as dangerous upstarts who are undermining market stability with reckless lending. The Pereiras view James as a conservative dinosaur blocking French economic development. The conflict between them dominates French finance in the 1850s and 1860s. Ultimately, the Rothschild approach proves wiser. Credit Mobilier collapses in 1867, destroyed by over-leveraging exactly as James predicted, but the episode reveals that the family's conservative approach, while safer, may sacrifice growth and market share. The revolutions of 1848 reveal both Rothschild power and its limits. When uprisings sweep across Europe, toppling governments and threatening the conservative order the Rothschilds helped finance, the family finds itself in a delicate position. They have profited from Metternich's system, but they are also Jewish, which means they are targets for both conservative anti-Semitism and revolutionary anti-capitalism. When revolutionaries attack the old order, they attack the Rothschilds as symbols of that order. When conservatives defend themselves, they use anti-Semitic rhetoric that implicates the Rothschilds in revolutionary chaos. In Vienna, Salomon's house is threatened by revolutionary crowds. In Paris, James's mansion is targeted for attack. In Frankfurt, Amschel faces demands from revolutionary authorities for loans to the new government. Each brother must navigate local chaos while maintaining the family's broader strategy. The family survives the revolutions by maintaining their fundamental discipline. They take no political positions. They honor all existing commitments. They refuse to finance either revolutionary or reactionary extremes. When the revolutions fail and conservative governments return to power, the Rothschilds are still there, still solvent, still willing to extend credit. Their refusal to choose sides, which looks like cynicism or cowardice, proves to be strategic wisdom. In unstable times, the institution that survives is often more valuable than the one that took the winning side. By the 1860s, a generational shift has occurred. The grandsons of Mayer Amschel are now running the 5 houses. They are wealthy beyond measure, ennobled, socially accepted in ways their grandfather could not have imagined. Lionel de Rothschild becomes the first Jewish member of the British Parliament in 1858, though it takes him 11 years to actually take his seat because he refuses to swear a Christian oath. The parliamentary struggle reveals the contradictions of Rothschild's success. Lionel is elected to represent the City of London in 1847, but he cannot take his seat because members must swear an oath on the true faith of a Christian. Lionel refuses. He is re-elected in 1849, 1852, 1857 and 1858. Each time he appears at Parliament, refuses the Christian oath and is denied admission. The standoff becomes a national debate about Jewish rights in Britain. Some argue that a man who finances the British government should be allowed to sit in the British Parliament regardless of religion. Others argue that Britain is a Christian nation and its Parliament should remain Christian. Lionel never wavers. He will serve in Parliament, but only on terms that respect his Jewish identity. Finally, in 1858, each House of Parliament is permitted to determine its own oath. The House of Commons changes its rules, allowing members to swear on the Old Testament and omit the phrase, "on the true faith of a Christian." Lionel takes his seat, becoming the first Jewish member of Parliament. He rarely speaks, he is not a political orator, but his presence is significant. The son of a Frankfurt ghetto resident now helps govern the British Empire. His cousin Alphonse in Paris is buying vineyards and building mansions. The Vienna branch is financing the construction of Austria's infrastructure. But something has changed in the family's relationship to the world they operate in. Mayer Amschel built the business from a ghetto, always aware of his outsider status, always certain that tolerance could be revoked. His grandsons are insiders, comfortable in aristocratic society, married to Christians in some cases, building art collections and country estates. They are still Jewish, still subject to periodic anti-Semitic attacks, but they are also part of the establishment in ways their grandfather never was. This assimilation creates a strange tension. The Rothschilds are simultaneously the most visible Jewish family in Europe and the family most integrated into Christian aristocracy. Anti-Semites attack them as proof that Jews control finance. Jews sometimes resent them for abandoning community traditions and marrying into the aristocracy. The Rothschilds exist in a space between worlds, belonging fully to neither. In 1869, the Suez Canal opens, connecting the Mediterranean to the Red Sea and creating a much faster route from Europe to Asia. The canal is a financial disaster for its builders. Costs have vastly exceeded projections. By 1875, the Egyptian Khedive, who owns nearly half the canal's shares, is bankrupt and desperate to sell. The British government wants those shares. Controlling Suez means controlling the route to India, but Parliament is not in session and cannot approve the purchase. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, needs £4 million immediately. He sends an agent to Lionel de Rothschild. The conversation, as later reported, is brief. The agent explains the situation. The Khedive will sell his shares, but only for immediate payment. The government needs the money now before Parliament reconvenes, before other buyers emerge. How much? Lionel asks. £4 million. Lionel pauses, perhaps calculating, perhaps considering risks. Then, the government shall have the money. When can we have it? Tomorrow. The entire transaction takes less than an hour. £4 million, approximately $500 million in modern terms, arranged through a single conversation without documents or guarantees beyond the British government's word. This is Rothschild power at its peak, the ability to move capital at a scale and speed that governments cannot match, based on relationships built over generations. The Suez Purchase makes Britain the dominant power in the canal and makes the Rothschilds substantial fees and continued government favour. It is the kind of transaction that the family was built to execute: large, time-sensitive, requiring absolute trust and instant liquidity. But it is also one of the last examples of this kind of power. The financial world is changing in ways that will diminish family banking partnerships in favour of larger, more impersonal institutions. The late 19th and early 20th centuries will see the rise of corporate banking, central banks, and international monetary systems that operate through institutions rather than family networks. The Rothschilds remain major players, but they are no longer unique. What they pioneered, multinational banking, bond market expertise, government relationships, has been adopted and scaled by others. The advantage that came from being the only family operating across 5 capitals disappears when dozens of institutions operate across dozens of capitals. World War I delivers a blow from which the family never fully recovers. The war splits Europe into hostile camps, and the Rothschild houses find themselves on opposite sides. The London and Paris branches are in allied countries. The Vienna and Frankfurt branches are in enemy territory. The Austrian branch, which had been among the most powerful, is destroyed by Austria-Hungary's defeat and the hyperinflation that follows. The German branch survives the war but is devastated by the economic chaos of the Weimar Republic. The family attempts to maintain unity across the war, but the network that was their fundamental strength is broken. Letters cannot cross battle lines. Coordination becomes impossible. Brothers who are supposed to function as a single organism find themselves subject to governments that view each other as existential enemies. The experience is traumatic for a family whose identity is built on unity. Lionel's sons in London cannot communicate with their cousins in Vienna. Business decisions that once involved consultation among all branches must now be made in isolation. The London house prospers from British war finance, while the Vienna house struggles under Austrian inflation and military defeats. For the first time since Mayer Amschel's death, the 5-branch structure stops functioning as a single entity. There are moments during the war when family loyalty conflicts with national obligation. The British government asks Lionel's son about Vienna branch activities. Are they financing the Austrian war effort? The Austrian government asks similar questions about London. Each branch must decide, do we protect family secrets or comply with government demands? The answer, painfully arrived at, is compliance. Survival requires demonstrating loyalty to the country where each branch operates, even if that means revealing information about other branches. This breaks something fundamental in family identity. The Rothschilds had always been transnational, operating above national allegiances, serving everyone and therefore belonging nowhere except to each other. The war forces them to choose, and each branch chooses its own country over family unity. When the war ends, they will try to rebuild the old connections, but the experience has taught them a hard lesson. In total war between great powers, there is no neutral ground, not even for the Rothschilds. After the war, the London and Paris branches remain significant, but they are operating in a transformed landscape. The gold standard has collapsed. The European empires that provided stable frameworks for 19th century finance are dissolving. New nations with uncertain futures are replacing old monarchies whose debts the Rothschilds had managed for decades. The Soviet Union has repudiated all debts, destroying enormous Rothschild investments in Russian railways and industries. The Russian losses are particularly devastating. The Rothschilds had invested heavily in Russian railways and oil fields in the late 19th century, believing that Russia's vast resources and growing economy offered opportunities that Western Europe could no longer provide. The family had financed railway construction connecting Moscow to the Black Sea, had invested in Baku oil fields that supplied much of Europe's petroleum, had held millions of pounds in Russian government bonds. When the Bolsheviks seize power in 1917, they repudiate all foreign debts and confiscate all foreign-owned property. The Rothschild investments, accumulated over decades representing a significant portion of family wealth, become worthless overnight. There is no compensation, no negotiation, just total loss. The Soviet Union's repudiation becomes a model for other revolutionary governments, and the Rothschilds watch decades of careful investment disappear. This teaches a painful lesson about the limits of financial power. In the 19th century, governments that defaulted faced consequences. They lost access to credit markets, faced diplomatic pressure, sometimes faced military intervention from creditor nations. But the Soviet Union does not care about access to Western credit markets. It is building an autarkic economy, explicitly rejecting integration into global capitalism. The Rothschilds have no leverage. Their wealth, their relationships, their reputation mean nothing to a government committed to destroying the entire system the family helped build. The interwar period brings continued challenges. The Great Depression devastates financial markets. The London and Paris branches survive, but profits plummet as bond markets collapse and government revenues decline. The era of easy money, when governments borrowed freely and repaid reliably, is ending. The new economic reality requires austerity, debt restructuring, defaults. The Rothschilds, who built their fortune on government lending, must navigate a world where governments can no longer afford to borrow and taxpayers resist repaying old debts. Anti-Semitism, which the Rothschilds had hoped would fade with assimilation and ennoblement, returns in virulent form. The rise of fascism in Germany makes Jewish wealth a target, and the Rothschilds, as the most visible Jewish family in Europe, become symbols in Nazi propaganda. The old 19th century cartoons of Rothschilds as octopi are revived and amplified. New conspiracy theories emerge, claiming the family caused the Great Depression, that they control the Federal Reserve, that they are orchestrating wars for profit. These theories are absurd. The Rothschilds have lost enormous wealth in the Depression and have no control over American monetary policy, but they are also dangerous. They provide a simple explanation for complex economic suffering. The Jews did it, and specifically the Rothschilds. In Germany, where economic collapse and political chaos create desperation for scapegoats, this message finds receptive audiences. The Rothschilds watch with growing alarm as the Nazis consolidate power in Germany. Some family members urge immediate liquidation of all German assets and departure from the country. Others argue that the Nazis are a temporary phenomenon, that German society is too sophisticated to sustain such extremism, that economic recovery will marginalize the radicals. It is a debate happening in Jewish communities across Germany, how seriously to take the threat, whether to abandon homes and businesses built over generations based on what might be temporary political turbulence. The Rothschilds, with their historical memory of persecution, should know better than to underestimate danger. But they are also victims of their own success. They have become so integrated into European high society, so comfortable in their status as nobility and financiers, that they cannot quite believe the old hatreds will return in lethal form. They are rich enough to feel insulated, powerful enough to assume they can negotiate, cosmopolitan enough to think themselves above the crude nationalism consuming Europe. They are wrong. In 1938, the Austrian branch is seized by the Nazis after the Anschluss. Louis von Rothschild, the last Austrian baron, is arrested and held for ransom. He is detained for over a year, interrogated, threatened, used as leverage to extract the family's assets. The Nazis want everything: the banks, the steelworks, the art collections, the palaces. Louis, from his cell, negotiates as best he can, trying to protect what can be protected, accepting losses where necessary to preserve his life and freedom. He is eventually released in exchange for the family's Austrian steelworks, essentially all Austrian Rothschild assets, and signs over the Witkowitz ironworks, one of the largest industrial complexes in Central Europe, valued at tens of millions. The Nazis get the steel production they need for rearmament. Louis gets his freedom and manages to leave Austria with his life. The entire Austrian branch, banks, businesses, properties accumulated over more than a century, is gone. The Frankfurt house is similarly confiscated, its assets stolen by the regime. The Red Shield house, where Mayer Amschel built the family fortune, is seized. The archives, the ledgers, the correspondence documenting generations of Rothschild history are scattered or destroyed. What took 5 generations to build is destroyed in months. The surviving branches, London, Paris, and a smaller presence in Switzerland, continue operating, but they are no longer the dominant force they once were. The world of post-World War II finance is dominated by American investment banks, by institutions like the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, by corporate structures that dwarf family partnerships. By the late 20th century, the Rothschild name carries enormous historical weight but limited contemporary power. The banks still exist, still operate, but they are boutique operations compared to modern financial giants. Rothschild & Co., the current incarnation of the family business, manages hundreds of billions in assets, significant, but small compared to J.P. Morgan Chase's trillions or BlackRock's 10 trillion. The modern Rothschild banks specialize in advisory work rather than lending. They help corporations structure mergers and acquisitions, advise governments on privatizations, arrange financing for complex transactions. This is profitable work requiring expertise and relationships, but it is fundamentally different from the business Mayer Amschel built. The 19th century Rothschilds were principals using their own capital to underwrite government bonds and finance projects. The modern Rothschilds are advisors, earning fees for expertise rather than returns on capital deployed. This shift reflects broader changes in finance. The rise of corporate banking, with capital raised from millions of shareholders, made family partnerships obsolete for large-scale lending. The development of public bond markets reduced the need for intermediaries like the Rothschilds, who once distributed government bonds across Europe. The creation of central banks and international monetary institutions like the IMF provided governments with alternative sources of credit and financial expertise. The Rothschilds adapted by finding niches where family continuity and discretion remain valuable. Wealthy families seeking to preserve fortunes across generations appreciate dealing with a bank that has preserved its own fortune across generations. Governments and corporations pursuing sensitive transactions value the confidentiality that boutique banks offer. The Rothschild name, even diminished from its 19th century peak, still carries weight in these specialized markets. Yet the family remains subjects of conspiracy theories that vastly exaggerate their power. These theories, which proliferated in the 19th century and metastasized online, claim the Rothschilds control the Federal Reserve, manipulate wars, or run a secret world government. The actual Rothschilds, meanwhile, operate wine businesses, manage art collections, and run boutique banking operations, successful but not remotely matching the conspiratorial fantasies. The gap between myth and reality has become so vast that it is almost comical, except that conspiracy theories have real consequences. The same false narratives that the Nazis used to justify confiscating Rothschild property now circulate online, reaching millions of people who have never read a history book but have watched YouTube videos claiming the Rothschilds control the world. These modern conspiracies recycle 19th century anti-Semitic tropes, applying them to contemporary events they cannot explain. When financial crises occur, conspiracists blame the Rothschilds. When wars break out, conspiracists claim the Rothschilds profit from both sides. When economic policies fail, conspiracists see Rothschild manipulation. The actual family has limited ability to respond. Denying the conspiracies gives them attention. Ignoring them allows them to spread unchallenged. The Rothschilds largely choose silence, conducting their business quietly, hoping that reality will eventually prevail over mythology. The persistence of these myths reveals something about how visible minorities are perceived. The Rothschilds were successful, Jewish, and transnational at a time when all three characteristics provoked anxiety. They became useful symbols for anyone wanting to explain complex financial developments through simple narratives of hidden control. The fact that their actual power has declined dramatically has done nothing to reduce the mythology around them. What, then, is the real legacy of the Rothschilds? Not the mythical control of world finance, but the actual historical achievement. They were the first family to build a truly multinational business operating as a single, coordinated entity across borders that divided nations and empires. They demonstrated that information speed creates financial advantage, that family networks can outperform institutions, and that patient capital accumulation over generations can create more lasting power than spectacular individual gambles. They also demonstrated the limits of such power. Wealth could not insulate them from political catastrophe. The Nazi confiscations proved that. Family networks could not survive when politics divided the family. World War I proved that. Information advantages could not be maintained when technology became universally available. The telegraph proved that. And social acceptance, which they pursued through ennoblement and assimilation, was always contingent on the goodwill of societies that retained deep anti-Semitic currents. The story of Mayer Amschel Rothschild's granddaughter Betty, married into Italian nobility, illustrates the contradictions of Rothschild's success. She wrote letters describing her life in sumptuous detail, the art, the estates, the aristocratic gatherings, but also her alienation. She was Jewish enough to be excluded from certain Christian spaces, Christian enough to be viewed suspiciously by traditional Jewish communities, rich enough to provoke resentment, and yet never quite able to escape the consciousness of being different. This was the cost of the family's success. They achieved wealth and influence beyond what any Jewish family had previously imagined, but they could never achieve the one thing that might have made that wealth secure. They could never stop being visibly Jewish in societies where that visibility made them targets. As we return to that moment in Frankfurt, September 1812, when Mayer Amschel dictated his final instructions, we can see the full arc of what he created. He built a system that would outlast him by generations, that would survive wars and revolutions, that would demonstrate new possibilities for how business could operate across borders. He channeled the trauma of growing up orphaned in a ghetto into an obsessive focus on family security, and that obsession created one of the most successful family businesses in history. But he could not have known, though perhaps he suspected, that the very success he engineered would make his descendants targets, that their wealth would be used against them as proof of Jewish conspiracy, that the international network he built would be reframed as sinister rather than innovative. He could not have known that 2 world wars would destroy what seemed like permanent position, that technological change would erode the information advantage he spent decades building, or that his great-great-grandchildren would be managing what amounts to a medium-sized boutique bank while conspiracy theorists imagine them ruling the world. What he gave his sons was not just a business, but a way of thinking about how power operates, information before action, relationships before transactions, family before partners, generations before quarters, survival before triumph. That way of thinking allowed 5 brothers from a Frankfurt ghetto to become the most powerful banking family in 19th century Europe. It allowed their descendants to survive catastrophes that destroyed most aristocratic fortunes. It created institutions that still operate today, more than 2 centuries after Mayer first hung the red shield above his door. The Rothschilds did not control history, but they understood better than most how to position themselves within it. They recognized that being the first to know what was happening mattered more than being the strongest or the richest. They understood that being distributed across multiple locations made them more resilient than being concentrated in one place. They grasped that patient capital accumulation beats spectacular gambling, and they learned painfully that none of these advantages could protect them from the political catastrophes of the 20th century. Their story is not about a shadowy cabal controlling events from behind the scenes. It is about how a family from the margins of European society used the few advantages available to them: tight family bonds, quick information, willingness to operate across borders that others feared, to build something unprecedented. It is about what success looks like when it emerges from constraint, what power looks like when wielded without political authority, and what happens when outsiders become insiders without ever fully escaping their outsider status. The Red Shield house in the Frankfurt Judengasse is gone now, destroyed in World War II bombing. The ghetto where it stood has been rebuilt, transformed into modern apartments and offices. Tourists who visit Frankfurt can find a memorial marking the location of the Judengasse, with plaques describing the Jewish community that lived there for centuries. But the physical street, the cramped houses, the walls and gates, all are gone, erased by war and urban development. The Five Brothers European network is gone too, not destroyed in a single catastrophe, but gradually dissolved over a century and a half. The Vienna branch destroyed by Nazis, the Frankfurt branch confiscated, the Naples branch closed in the late 19th century when Italian unification reduced the city's importance. What remains are the London and Paris branches, successful, but no longer connected in the way Mayer Amschel envisioned, no longer functioning as one organism distributed across capitals. The European financial order the Rothschilds dominated is gone. The world of aristocratic borrowers and court bankers, of family-run banks financing governments, of information advantages measured in days and weeks, that world ended with World War I and the technological transformations that preceded it. Modern finance operates through institutions with thousands of employees, using computer systems that process information in milliseconds, serving democratized capital markets where millions of investors allocate trillions of dollars. What remains is a family that still operates banking businesses, still manages wealth, still carries a name that echoes across 2 centuries. What remains is a historical legacy that offers lessons about how business, information, and power operate. What remains is the template the Rothschilds created: multinational coordination, information-based advantage, patient capital accumulation that modern corporations and institutions have adopted and scaled beyond anything Mayer Amschel could have imagined. And what remains most powerfully is the question Mayer Amschel asked himself when he was an orphaned boy on a locked street. How do you build something that lasts when you start with nothing and the world wants to keep you in your place? His answer: family, information, discipline, patience, built an empire. That it did not last forever does not diminish the achievement. Nothing lasts forever. What matters is what you build with the time you have and the tools you are given. From that perspective, the story of the Rothschilds is not a story of conspiracy or control. It is a story of what can be built when you understand that knowing what others do not know is the most valuable asset of all. It is a story of how constraint breeds innovation, how outsider status can become strategic advantage, how family bonds can substitute for institutional power. It is a story of extraordinary success achieved through methods available to anyone willing to prioritize information, relationships, and long-term thinking over short-term gain. The Rothschilds started with nothing but knowledge and family. They built, over 5 generations, a financial dynasty that shaped European history. They demonstrated that the right information, properly understood and quickly acted upon, can overcome almost any other disadvantage. They proved that coordinated action across borders can create power that no single national institution can match. They showed that patient capital, accumulated over generations and never squandered on immediate consumption, compounds into influence that spectacular gambles rarely achieve. These lessons remain valid whether applied to family businesses, corporations, or individual careers. Information still matters, perhaps more than ever in an age where data is infinite, but understanding remains scarce. Relationships still create opportunities that transactions alone cannot. Long-term thinking still beats short-term optimization. Family, or the modern equivalent, teams of people who trust each other absolutely, still outperforms hierarchies and markets in certain contexts. The Rothschild story is ultimately a human story, an orphaned boy who refused to accept his circumstances, who learned from poverty the importance of security, who built from trauma a vision of family unity that would survive him by centuries. Mayer Amschel Rothschild could not have known that his obsession with information would create a 19th-century financial empire. He could not have known that his insistence on family unity would become the foundation of that empire. He could not have known that his name would echo across centuries, distorted by mythology, but rooted in genuine achievement. What he did know, lying in that Frankfurt house in September 1812, surrounded by the 5 sons he had positioned across Europe, was that he had built something that would outlast him. He had taken the constraints that defined his life, the ghetto, the restrictions, the poverty, and transformed them into a system that transcended those constraints. He had answered, for himself and his descendants, the question every person from the margins must answer: how do you build power when the powerful want to keep you powerless? His answer was not perfect. It involved compromises, moral ambiguities, and an insularity that sometimes became self-defeating. But it worked. For a century, the Rothschilds were the most powerful banking family in Europe. For 2 centuries, the name has resonated across finance and popular culture. The actual power may have diminished, but the achievement remains, from a locked ghetto street to the heights of European finance, through knowledge, family, and the understanding that information is the ultimate form of capital.